Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Tori, and today we have a very special guest back on the channel after quite a while. We haven't chatted on my channel for a while, at least. And we are going to sit down and talk a little bit about our fantasy worlds. And so one of the things that I've noticed about the conversations that are happening around the indie author sphere a lot is there's a lot of kind of hustle culture, and there's a lot of pressure to get the next book out, and authors are constantly trying to put out the next book in their series and expand, which is awesome. But I think the reason that I invited my guest on today is that we both have the experience of sitting with the same world for a long time, and we wanted to discuss that a little bit. We're both gonna kind of out ourselves a little bit here, but very happy to welcome back to my channel Dr. Philip Chase, fellow epic fantasy author.
Yeah, Tori, thank you so much for the warm welcome and the invitation to chat with you. I've always enjoyed our conversations, and you picked a really great topic for me because this was something that I, as a young person falling in love with the Lord of the Rings and everything else, found to be incredibly vital to my experience of fantasy, was becoming immersed in a complete world, or at least the illusion of a complete world.
Right.
So I wanted to spend time developing Jormungand in my case, and figuring out its history and the mythology and its religions and the landscape and everything else, so that it would feel like a fully realized world for me as the author, but also, of course, for the reader as well. And it was a process that I enjoyed incredibly. One of the funnest parts of writing was just imagining this world. So I'm really happy to be talking with you.
Yeah, well, this is one of those things I feel like as booktubers, and we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record. As booktubers, we spend so much time talking about other people's worlds that we love, which is great fun, and that's why we do it. But it's always, I think, a little different. It's a very different experience talking about our own, and there's a depth there of just, because I know both of us would come from the same perspective of, we pour our heart and souls into these worlds and we love them so much that it's like talking about a big part of ourselves. And so I'm very excited because basically we just get to gush about our stories for an hour. And it's gonna be great.
I mean, that's one way to look at it, right?
Right. Yeah. So before we get started, while you're watching the video, everybody in the audience, feel free to leave us questions or comments down in the comments below. And also in the description box, you will find links to both my books and also Dr. Chase's books. So you can go check those out if you haven't already. But I want to start a little bit. You mentioned Lord of the Rings already. And of course, that was on the bingo card. If you and I are going to talk about our influences in our books, we have to bring up Lord of the Rings. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your love for world building from other authors, and Tolkien, of course, being a big part of that. And any other major influences, like what was it about the idea of world building and creating that really called to you in your first influences?
I think it was in large part this idea that you see a lot in Old English poetry and in medieval storytelling in general. Something that very much inspired Tolkien and is present in his own work is this relationship that we have here in the present with the past, and how the lives of the past are connected to us and inform who we are and what we can learn from their struggles and their triumphs and their joys and their sorrows. So seeing the past as a kind of mirror for ourselves. And yes, there are, of course, differences between us and the people of the past, but it's in the similarities that, in the connections, that I think we find a whole lot of meaning. Yes, the things that are different are curiosities and sometimes fun to learn about too, but those similarities, those eternal questions, those questions that seem to be part of what makes literature last. The ideas, for example, that life is fleeting, and how do we respond to the fact that one day our friends will be gone, our family will be gone, our possessions, and we ourselves will be gone? How do we respond to our mortality? And that is something that Tolkien picks up in a big way in terms of how he treats these questions, from his deep knowledge of Old English poetry and Old Norse, and his lifelong investment in medieval literature and language, and so yeah, it was. I can't even remember what you asked in the first place.
No, that was beautifully said.
Yeah.
Just about the influences that you had in Tolkien, of course,
Yeah.
and what called you into that world building yourself, like what all of those beautiful which you said perfectly. Totally agree with all of that. So, what about that called you to say, okay, I don't want to just read it; I want to build it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was Tolkien. It was also, I have to say, Ursula Le Guin's Earthscape books. I loved those. And there was a kind of wistful beauty to the world that she created that I found incredibly poignant and appealing. And that also was inspiring for me. And I should mention Tad Williams's Austin Ard, in particular, the first trilogy. I haven't read the sequel trilogy. I'm going to remedy that soon. But Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is
the never-ending TBR mountain.
Yeah, that's a perpetual problem we have. But yeah, these are worlds that were obviously created with great care and love and a sense of our connection to other peoples and our ability to connect with other people despite difference. And in some cases, you're talking about people and other races in fantasy, right? Like dwarves or elves or whatnot, and making these kinds of connections. These are real world things to me that are terribly important. Having spent a fair amount of my life traveling and living in cultures that I did not grow up in, and having the revelation that those people that I met in these places were essentially very much like me, that I had so much to learn from them, and feeling the beauty of my connection with those people. That's something that very much speaks to me in fantasy as well. So all of that meant to me that I just wanted to try to duplicate that for other people. I can remember as young as 12 years old finishing The Lord of the Rings and putting that book down and just feeling this sense of wonder and awe and sadness too, the melancholy of it, and just the beauty of it. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to do what I just felt. I had no way. I had no way to articulate the idea of catharsis when I was a 12-year-old boy.
Sure.
I did know that I wanted to try to do that. And it's incredibly fulfilling to spend time doing that. I feel terrible for people who use AI to write books, because I feel like they're losing the best part of the whole process, which is the act of creating.
Yeah.
That steeping yourself and enjoying just the tweaking. And even if you're like making a map for your world and a mountain here, and filling all that out is such a fulfilling, meaningful process. I think we need to create in one way or another. I never feel happier or more fulfilled or more at peace than when I'm creating. I'm making something. So all of these things really just sort of, I guess, converge in my desire to create a world that hopefully other people would find compelling, and a world in which a world that reflects the things that we go through. So yeah. How about you? What motivated you to say, I'm going to do that?
It's really funny because I think initial kickstart into wanting to create stories really kind of began with characters, which, for anybody who watches my videos or has heard me talk for 5 minutes is not surprised by that. So when I was very young, I was kind of in a very intimate scale, what you were talking about, where I would latch on to a specific character, and the amount of catharsis and like the way that I would be able to emotionally channel my own experiences as a young kid through these characters was just magic to me. And it was a way oftentimes of even being able to express myself in a way that I couldn't, just through my own words at that point, because I was, of course, much younger and didn't have the experience to yet. And the books that really kind of kickstarted my love for character storytelling, White Fang by Jack London is one of my ultimate biggest influences in terms of character writing. And I remember being so, I've lost count of how many times I've read White Fang. And I remember being so immersed. And I think that was one of the first books where I was really in the story and I couldn't look away. I couldn't put it down. And like you said, that catharsis afterwards of realizing that I was feeling what this character is feeling and that I was able to be part of that storytelling just completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I also was reading a ton of books from the library. I was a horse nut at that age and would bring home paper sacks full of books from the library and have them all read within 2 weeks because I, was a homeschooler and just reading constantly. And I finally got to a point where something would happen in one of the books and I'd look at it and be like, what if instead of that happening, this had happened instead? How would the story change? And maybe I would like that better. And then that kind of kickstarted the whole, well, maybe I kind of want to try writing a story about a character and see what happens.
Yeah.
And epic fantasy came much later. I think Lord of the Rings also was a big influence for me there, but in a different medium, because I grew up, my first experience with Lord of the Rings was Peter Jackson's films. And I remember at 11 years old walking through a friend's family room with the cave troll scene from Fellowship on the screen. And I completely changed my entire world in like 5 minutes. God, what is that? And it just opened so quickly the idea of different creatures and worlds and places, and the idea of that fellowship, of course, really spoke to me a lot too. And yeah, ever since I've just been, how do I build bigger? What kind of a story can I make? And it's just kind of expanded as I've tried different projects throughout the years. So yeah, that's kind of my origin story. But I would even go farther back than that a little bit too, because I grew up, my grandfather is a war historian. And I grew up listening to stories of the Civil War and World War II, and specifically what I've always taken away from that, and it's actually going to be in the dedication of my next novel, is that he really taught me that these grand scale stories are only as important as the people who are in them.
That's beautiful.
And that has been something that really I've kept very close with all of the stories that I write, no matter how big of a scale, the overall conflict, how many nations are involved. It's always about the individual lives that are affected by them and who are involved in them. And that's something that I hope I can always keep at kind of as my kind of North Star when I'm writing, is to make sure that I never lose sight of each individual life or story within the story being the core importance of the whole process.
So true. Like when you read a historical fiction, like say an account of Gettysburg or something like that, and you get sucked into that story because it's being presented through the eyes of certain individual characters who are experiencing that, and you're experiencing it vicariously with them. I think that's a really important point you made there about how history comes alive when we connect to the individuals within it, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, and I love the idea, because I think both of our series, you have The Way of Adan, which kind of evokes the idea of a path being traveled, right? And also for mine, The Legends of the Bruhai, both of those are like those who have come before are kind of a underlying foundation, I think, of both of those. And it ties into what you were saying earlier about looking back to the past and holding up that mirror and saying these were people too. And like you said, they lived different lives in a lot of ways, but it also, there's so many similarities between us and people who lived however many hundreds or thousands of years ago. And what can we learn and how can we better ourselves by knowing their stories.
Yeah, and also people in the present whom we regard as different from us
Right,
in some
exactly.
ways, and how can we learn to see them and understand their humanity and respect it, and
Yeah.
even come to love it,
Yeah.
in cases. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a fun part about fantasy is it allows us the chance to kind of explore cultures that might be similar to what we're used to, because of course we write what we know to some degree, but
Hmm.
also exploring the idea of, but what if there was something different or opposite, or, and what similarities can we still find within these different cultures, within the worlds that we're creating.
Yeah.
And like you said, I'm a big advocate for finding unity over division, because there's more
Mhm.
than enough of that to begin with.
Sure.
And so every time you walk into a room, what's the common ground, right? What small piece of common ground can you find with any person? And it's not as hard as people think it is sometimes. I think. um, but yeah, so Tolkien and the medieval and poetic epics obviously have been a huge influence for you.
Hmm.
As you've continued working through your story, because we should probably mention, um, Jormungand's been around, you said, for 21 years now.
Yeah, I started this whole thing in the summer of 2004, and the first thing I did was draw a map. Yeah.
Love it. Which is like the finished version of that is now behind you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
beautiful. Shout out to Jack Shepherd.
Jack Shepherd, of course, made it
Amazing.
beautiful. I mean, mine was okay, but he made it really nice. So yeah, and
Yeah.
the full thing is here in the
Oh,
well.
it's
I don't want to blend
beautiful.
it too much, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He did a great job with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing was the map. And where do you start? Like, that was one of the other questions I had in our list, was
Uh huh.
just, okay, I want to build a world. Well, that's a pretty lofty, for any fantasy author. That's a pretty lofty. Oh, I'm just going to create a world and populate it. It's going to be fine. Where do you even begin with
Mm.
the histories and the cultures and even the map, like what you want it to look like? Did you have some kind of nuggets of core? This is what I know I want to start with.
I did because I cheated. I based the cultures of my fictional world and their languages, and so
Mm,
by extension, their place names and personal
right.
names on older cultures or cultures that I'm familiar with. So, for example, in the countries or the kingdoms like the Mark and Elland and Torland, they're based very firmly on Old English. The
Right.
names in there are Old English derived. Some I made up and had fun with, but they're very obviously Old English names. Whereas Grimrick is definitely Old Norse. And
Sure.
again, that's a language that I have some familiarity with. And I was able to make up names and steal names and so on and so forth from various sources. And then of the Southwest, Adanon and Caergillion are very Celtic. And
Mm,
Welsh is a language that I studied when I was younger. And so I was able to draw from that. And then
yeah.
for Astrolad and the Eastern Kingdoms, I lived in South Asia for a time
Mm,
and speak Nepali. So I was able to draw from that while creating those cultures, and added a lot of fictional elements to all of these
yeah.
things, obviously. But starting with those things as a foundation, and helping me to establish a kind of linguistic consistency
Right.
within those various kingdoms, because I didn't want to just throw a bunch of cool names at the map and say, yeah, that's cool, and leave it
Right.
there. I wanted to have a kind of linguistic feel
Mm,
to each of these places that would underpin their culture. And from there, I wrote history, and I wrote all about their mythology and their various religion, because religion is very important in my
right.
trilogy. There's a holy war as a backdrop, so I needed to
Right.
flesh that out. And a lot of that never makes its way into the story, but it's
Right.
there for us as authors, right, to
Right.
just kind of feel like we're inhabiting this place as the story unfolds. But yeah, so that's where I started.
Yeah.
What was your process like?
I think with Drillar specifically, I was fresh out of reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, the first couple of books when I started,
Okay.
and Erickson definitely is another later influence for me in college who really opened my mental doors on what was possible in fantasy, and really kind of removed, I think, a lot of the mental barriers I had subconsciously about it, and encouraged me, I think, as a writer to be able to push past maybe some of the traditional boxes that I was feeling a little penned in by.
Yeah.
And the original series is actually a sequel series to Legends of the Bruhai. And I'll go back to that once, of course, I finish this one. But it was very much me with a big piece of paper. I've taped a whole bunch of pieces of paper together and started drawing a map. I don't know what it is. I think maybe there's a way of grounding yourself with the map. Like, this is a real place that your brain kind of needs to get started. Okay, and then these people can live here, and these people can live here, and here's the different areas.
Yep.
And so I definitely found that helpful. As I've gone further, it's definitely morphed from some very simplistic cultures in the beginning, where I just had the bare feeling of what I wanted them to be, all the way up to now where they're a lot more fleshed out, and I can, like you, I'm also not nearly as accomplished as you in the linguistics field, but I have a love of language. And so I try to think through, okay, these two cultures are kind of from the same area, but they've split apart. So they're going to have some similarities in how they talk, but also some differences or different pronunciations of things.
Yep.
And also the breakdown of language over time is something that's in the background of my trilogy, and how the words for things have changed and perhaps diluted power, know? So that was kind of a start. I knew I wanted to have a more ancient world culture, because I've always been obsessed with ancient world civilizations, and that was a big deal. And also I knew I wanted bladed weapons instead of, I'm not, shout out to all of the amazing authors who write urban fantasy and anything with flintlock and all of that. That's just not I love a good old sword and spear kind of story. So that was kind of the beginning, and I started with that tiny little kernel, and I was like, all right, now let's start putting pieces in place. But I was curious with cultures too, and I feel like this is something that time really adds depth to for me personally, and I was wondering if you felt the same about that. Over time, as you've been building these different cultures, what do you feel like are the most important building blocks as an author to make sure you don't skip over certain things when you're designing a culture of people?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think for me, the process was more like build this world.
Yeah.
And then it was figure out, okay, what's the story that's going to happen here? Because the story is ultimately really what's important.
Right.
And there were definitely things that I wanted to include in the story that I didn't really have any business including, that they were there because, well, and I had to edit out some of these things.
But they're cool.
I think they're cool, but
yeah,
do they serve the story?
Right.
So but I still have things like I have poem, songs, and things like that, and because I think they're cool.
Yeah.
They're based on Old English poetry, but I only keep them in there if I feel that they are an organic part of the story, where somebody doesn't just randomly start telling this history of whatever or break into song for no reason. There's usually some context around that. But even more importantly for me, are these songs and stories thematically relevant to what I'm doing in the bigger tale? And often what I do with a poem and that kind of thing is I do some foreshadowing, and I do, there are like if exile is a huge theme and The Way of Adan, and the main character encounters various forms of exile. And there are old stories that are part of that journey that come up that are wrinkles on this theme of exile.
Right.
And not just exile, period. It's how identity is intertwined with the group that we belong to,
Right.
and how when you're robbed of that, where does that leave you in terms of your identity? And so, in other words, it's a way into exploring what identity is and how it functions, and how it can change, and how maybe sometimes we hold on to parts of ourselves from the past. But yeah, so it was for me, the starting point was the world building, and then what I had to work through over time was really fleshing out that journey, the characters, and everything else. That's for me what in various iterations of this book, as I came back and worked on it more and more and more, it was more, how do these characters inhabit this world, and what does that mean for their journey, and how does that inform the story I'm trying to tell in this book, in this trilogy. That's how it evolved for me. And I don't think in terms of the history and the world itself, it didn't change very much in the process. I will say that a couple of times, because I tried very hard to make this real, in the sense that I would find out, okay, how far can an army march in or how far can you sail in a 90-foot long Viking style longship, or in X number of hours or whatever. I had to figure out all these things. So I ended up changing a few things on the map based on what I needed the story to be. So I made a certain island a little bit smaller, or I extended a piece of land over here, or I moved a swamp a little bit over to the west, or whatever I needed to do in order for the story to work. So I did tweak little things. The one thing I will say that I did a big change, initially I had a lot more kingdoms on my map.
Oh, okay.
And although I ended up self-publishing, I did work with an agent for a few years. And one of the first things he said to me was, you need to cut in half the number of kingdoms you have. There are too many. Yeah. And you're just going to confuse your reader, and it doesn't serve any purpose. So I did what he said. I actually cut in half the number of kingdoms that I had. And I think that's a good thing that I listened to it.
Yeah.
Because I think the thing you have to remember is, as much fun as it is to build these worlds, it's story first. It's always story first. And how does this serve the story? So that's what kept, I guess, for me evolving is okay, how does this serve the story? And if it doesn't, I had to take out certain parts of the book, because I realized, no, that's really just an unnecessary tangent that doesn't add anything thematically. Anything else. So it's got to go. And as painful as that is, it
is. It's like a surgery.
Yeah. Like, is this organ really important? Maybe. Let's find out.
Well, that's, the whole concept of kill your darlings, right? Which is so hard in writing, I think. And I think that's something too, over time, it gives you a chance to practice that and to see those different iterations of the story and how it gets more and more coherent and cohesive as you go along and move through those different versions of it. It's funny too, because I think for me with Legends, the world itself is a character in a way. Especially because the magic system of my world is deeply embedded within the earth itself. And so for me, there's always kind of that, well, the foundational character of the world itself, how is that interacting with the characters, and how are they then interacting back to it? And how does that feed the deeper themes, while also trying to build each individual character's lives, outside of that. It's a lot of evolving as you go and figuring out what parts of your story are the most important. Because I don't know about for you, but sometimes I think we can feel so deeply about so many themes, kind of like having too many kingdoms on the map, that you have to really say, okay, but I need to prioritize these. What is the most important theme that I'm always going to come back to first, and then, kind of sub themes after that. And identity is a big one for me too, in a lot of the same ways that you were mentioning, because I do have characters who are displaced or moved into a culture that is completely foreign to them.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was a fun way of playing with the perspective also, and hopefully getting my readers to see the way that one person from culture A thinks about culture B versus the way that somebody from culture B thinks about, culture A, and seeing that from both sides and recognizing like neither one of them are right. Like they both have this idealized, assumption about what the other culture might be like, and then they get there and it's a bit of a reality check, right? Like, oh wait a second, this isn't what I thought it was. And also the identity of being able to keep who you are in the face of being displaced or being forced into a role perhaps that isn't who your character thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
And that's identity is a huge theme for me in Bloodstones as well, and on an individual level but also on a cultural level. So I think for me too, that would probably be like my foundational theme throughout the series. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about why epic fantasy specifically, because I know both of us really have loved it as readers. And I've dabbled in some other subgenres that are not epic fantasy. But I was wondering, and this is, I'm sure, a conversation that you've probably had in other live streams before, but what is it about epic fantasy as an author that's like, that's the heart of what we are going to probably all keep coming back to in terms of our wanting to write stories within that genre?
Yeah. I think quest is at the heart of epic fantasy, and specifically the search for meaning.
Yeah.
Is something that I think epic fantasy handles really magnificently.
Yeah.
And the idea that a character in a story can end that journey with a much deeper sense of who they are and a
Yeah.
much deeper sense of connection with the world around them.
Yeah.
That in itself is wonderful. But I think that the reader, again, vicariously feels that, experiences that sense of meaning as well. That going on that journey with the character confers that same victory, that same triumph,
Yeah.
and loss along the way, but ultimately gives the reader, you come back from that journey, from that experience with a greater sense of connection with the world around you. So for me, I think that's something I very much seek in my storytelling as well, is that I want my reader to emerge from this experience feeling a deeper sense of connection and clarity about who they are and how they can be in the world. And I just the epic fantasy can do that for us. And I do respect that other kinds of fantasy can do other things. I think it's great that we have something like, Grimdark, for example, which may be more interested in exploring our disconnection and our sense of isolation and alienation in a world that is fundamentally without meaning. I think that's important too. But I'm where I'm in my I guess my sweet spot for me anyway, where I want to spend the most time is probably in epic fantasy. And so that's what I was attracted to write, because I'm looking for meaning too. I'm looking for connection. And in my life, I think I've found the most meaning from connection with other people.
Yeah.
And the sense of transcendence that can bring.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think too, I mean, epic fantasy is such a big sandbox, there's so many, it's almost hard in this respect, because there are so many possibilities within epic fantasy. As an author, you really have to set your own boundaries. I would say probably more so than in some other genres, just because you are coming up with the world yourself. You are creating everything from the ground up, and it's still going to be very heavily influenced by what you know and what you love. But you're essentially able to set those boundaries a little easier for yourself. And sometimes, like you said, we have to learn to kind of edit and bring ourselves back down to earth a little bit. because it can get too big for sure. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just I was just thinking as you were talking, to the point where my latest book, While Darkness Gathers, is a sequel to the Adan trilogy, and it was an experiment for me to see how much can I streamline this? What is the core of the story? How much can I lose from the way I tell story to make a more streamlined but still compelling story?
Yeah.
That was something I was trying to do. It's a much shorter book. It's 300 pages. And it's, I hope it works for people. So far, it seems to be.
We always cross our fingers, right?
Yeah. Every time.
Every time. Yep.
If some author says, "I know every book I write is going to be a big hit," I'll say, "Really? Wow. Okay. I want whatever medication you're on."
Right.
So, but yeah, no, it was an experiment for me to see how much can I lose and still do what I want to do. Now, I love Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings. I love Tad Williams. I love Malazan. I love Jenny Wirtz's Wars of Light and Shadow. I love these big, sprawling, vast, epic series with lots of world building, and I like spending my time there. But sometimes, Le Guin is actually my model for this. An author who can do so much with so few words.
Yeah.
Her books are usually pretty spare. They're pretty short. But somehow I leave one of her books just as moved, just as compelled to ponder my life, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
How does she do that? I want to try to do that,
Right.
So yeah, we can give ourselves challenges, I suppose.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think Daniel Abraham is a influence for me in that regard too. Like every once in a while, and I felt this when I was reading Malazan, and I felt it again. Have felt it since then, but especially with Long Price Quartet.
Yep.
Sometimes you open a book and you just know that you're reading a masterclass in your genre. And for me, he was such a great example of how to pack into 4 volumes of 1,000 pages total, what a lot of authors might take 10 to 14 books to explore. Right. And somehow he pulled it off. And so I think, like you said, it's important to challenge ourselves and to constantly be reassessing where we're at in the process and with the story to say, okay, am I still following that same North Star? Have I gone off the beaten path at all here? Can I try something different and see how that feels within the story? Like I'm currently working on a 1.5 novella. I'm always pointing to the wrong spot within the Bruhai world. And that's been a completely new experience because I've never written a novella before. Yeah. And so taking this grand scale world and saying, okay, we're going to focus on a single character and a little bit of depth that's going to add to what we know from book 1. And it's going to be 40,000 words.
It's hard.
Oh, I'm loving it. But I'm also like, wow, this is really testing me in a good way as an author. Say, okay, can you take that world and boil it down to a novella and still make it engaging and immersive and fit in with that larger series?
Yeah. I would even go as far as to say that it's harder to become a great short story writer than it is to be a great novelist.
Yeah.
I would actually argue that. Because it takes much more focus, and much more deliberation.
Yeah. Well, you have to really set, and that's again where those boundaries really come in your mind, because you have to say, I have this much space. How deep of a story can I tell in 5,000 words, 10,000 words, 40,000, 150, in each of those ranges, how can I reach the same depth of immersion? Not necessarily, you're not going to be able to explore as much in a 40,000 word novella, but how can I still give my reader that same feeling of depth in a shorter story? Which is what I'm trying to stay focused on with the novella. But I do want to jump into characters a little bit, because I know for both of us, those characters, they've been around for a really long time. And I'm sure for you too, they feel like real people to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people talk to me and ask me questions about them in interviews all the time, and I talk about them like they live next door. You know.
Yep.
So for you with your characters, were there some characters that have really changed over the time that you've been writing the story, or some of them that you feel were the most cathartic for you specifically as the author to write?
Yeah, for sure. There are characters who, of course, this was by design, who have arcs that take them really far from where they started.
Yeah.
And most of the characters actually are not unchanged by the time they get to the end of this. There's one character in particular, though, that usually I'm a pretty planned writer. I like to plan things out. I have outlines. I have pretty, details about what I want to do, and I know where the big spots are, and I sometimes have to flesh out a little bit of the stuff in between. But once in a while, the story just grabs a hold of me and says, guess what? You're going somewhere you didn't even realize you were going to go.
Yeah.
I had one character do that to me in the third book of my trilogy.
Oh.
Suddenly there's a new character, a POV character who just took over, and it was not something I expected. And I think it's fair to say this character is probably a favorite of most people who finish reading the trilogy. And I feel like that's part of the creative process. And when something like that happens, you have to listen. You have to listen, because your brain isn't just writing when you're in front of the keyboard tapping away, or if you're really old fashioned writing with your pen and your notebook, whatever. Your brain is working on it even when you're sleeping. Your brain is, when you're in the midst of that creative journey, when you're in the midst of that process, your brain is constantly thinking about it. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and realize, I need to put this here. And then I'll actually get up, and writers probably have really a hard time sleeping, because we wake ourselves up in the middle of the night realizing, oh, wait, I have to do this. And if you don't write it down, of course, it's gone.
You will forget
in the morning.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you read it in the morning, you're like, what did I write down?
It doesn't make any sense.
Wait, this is gold. This is actually really But anyway, it almost feels like the story speaks to you.
Yeah.
And for me, it was this character just kind of grabbing me by the front of my shirt and saying, guess what? Boom, we're going.
My turn.
I had to go there. I mean, that was a character that really grew during the creative process of writing the story, and probably one of the best characters I've ever written.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought that up, because I think there's such a constant conversation in the community about what type of a writer you are, what type of process you use. Are you a planner? Are you a pantser? Are you an architect? Are you a gardener? All this stuff. Right. And I think everybody's on a spectrum, right? Like there's no pure one or the other. Usually people are a mixture of things, and every book also can require a different process depending on, what type of story you need to tell. But I think it's important that you said that, because I'm more on the pantser / gardener side of things. And you're more like, you've got your outlines, you're more on the planner side of things. And both of us, I think, would highly recommend to other authors, if that story speaks to you and pulls you, listen.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what type of process you use, that story, especially when you've sat with it and let it rest within your subconscious for so long, it does start to take on a life of its own, and you want it to, right? That's one of the magical parts of storytelling, is that it's a vibrant world that lives on its own. And so, I had the same thing in Bloodstones, where I wasn't planning on writing a character from this other culture. And all of a sudden I go, chapter 8 or whatever chapter it was, and start typing. All of a sudden there's this horse warrior that just kind of flies onto the page, and she is telling her story now. And I was like, okay. And she's a huge backbone of the story now. And I love writing her. And I think subconsciously, your creative spirit knows what it needs also. Because what I was missing up until the point where she as a character enters the story is my other characters have to be very controlled. They're very, they're looking at the world in a very specific lens. And Sindri was complete liberation. She is pure instinct. She's this very impulsive, instinctual character. And the freedom I felt every time I got to one of her chapters, and I needed that bit of respite. And then I could go back and really focus on the political, boundaries and the control and all of that. So I think the story, as it starts to come to life, it knows what it needs, and it kind of pulls that out of you as the writer. I always tell people I discover the story more than I create it.
Well, this is why I think a lot of writers like Tolkien or Gene Wolfe have posed as mere translators.
Right.
They're channels through which this story is reaching us, in a sense. And I feel like when we're really in the depth of our most creative mode, it is a matter of channeling almost.
Very much, yeah. Yeah, it was kind of cool. So Sylvia from Library Unbounded, a fellow booktuber of ours that is just a wonderful person. She read Bloodstones a few months ago, and then she did a painting that I just feel so honored that she made. But it was such a cool visual representation of how I feel when I'm writing. And she and I had a conversation where I talked about the characters and having a conversation with them and saying that I discover their story. And she painted a picture of me sitting at a desk with the characters standing around me.
Oh, how cool is that?
It's the most beautiful thing, Philip. I'm still like in awe of it. It's so amazing. And it was such a beautiful, I got really emotional because it was like, that's what I feel when I'm writing. I feel like these characters are here while I'm writing. And I think for a lot of people that aren't storytellers, that's kind of a hard thing to understand how real they become.
Yeah.
But it's such a special relationship. And I think goes back to our theme of this conversation of spending, between the two of us, 36 years with these characters and these worlds.
Yeah.
It's like a friendship that you've had for 15 to 20 years. Right? The depth that you get to know the other person and the way that you can kind of guess what they're thinking without asking, and the depth of loyalty there really grows to something pretty profound, at least in my experience.
Yeah. For sure. And oftentimes we will base some parts of the personalities of these characters that are in our stories on people we actually know.
Oh, absolutely.
There are my daughters are in these books, and at least in part, my wife, my friends, other people I've known throughout my life have appeared in at least there's a bit of them in this character or
sprinkling. Yeah. So how much of that would you say you do? Because I know for me, oftentimes it's kind of subconscious, and I'll realize it after the fact where I was like, oh, this character kind of reminds me of, so-and-so, or sometimes it's more intentional, but oftentimes I feel like that's another subconscious thing that we're just drawing on what we know and love.
Absolutely both. Yeah. Sometimes I plan it, and other times I realize only after, oh, I know where I'm getting that.
I wonder if I should tell them or not. Yeah. So do you feel like there is a character or a specific part of the Way of Adan trilogy, at least, or While Darkness Gathers could be included in this too, that was the most cathartic for you as the author? Because I feel like for me, for the readers to have a deeply emotive, cathartic experience, the author has to have it first.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And everybody's going to respond to stories differently. We're going to bring our own experiences to them. But I remember in talking to Fonda Lee last year, she was talking about how readers often will say like, oh, you have no idea how much such and such event hurt me, or like, it meant so. And she's like, I can guarantee you it hurt me more, and it hurt me first. So yeah, for you as the author, what part of this particular story and world is the most cathartic?
Oh gosh. Well, I can't say too specifically because there'd be spoilers involved, but yes, there are parts
Yeah.
where readers have said to me, "This part made me cry," and
Mm,
yeah, me too.
yeah. Yeah. I get
So
it.
there are, in both the trilogy, but also especially in While Darkness Gathers, there's a lot about
Mm,
parent-child
mm,
relationships.
yeah.
And for whatever reason, I've always felt that there's something very special about a mother's love
Mm,
for her child. And that is something that always gets me in a
yeah.
story. There's a mother and there's some kind of a sacrifice or something. It just gets me every time.
Yeah.
Because I often feel that children don't entirely understand, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, how a parent is loving them when they're
Right.
younger, and only when they're
Yeah.
older and they look back and they see their parents as, I think when we're really small, we see our parents as kind of, often we see them as like superheroes. Like
Oh, yeah.
I remember very distinctly when my older daughter was 4, looked up at me one day and said, "Daddy, you're the strongest man in the world, right?" And I looked down at her and said, "Yes, I am."
Yeah, of course. Yeah, own that.
Of course, by the time they're teenagers, you're suddenly like the lamest person in the universe. And they won't, be within a 50-foot radius of you if you're like in public somewhere,
Right.
and then something happens where they just they're usually in their teens, late
Yeah.
teens, maybe, where they realize, oh, wait, my parent isn't a superhero. They're not the
Yeah.
lamest
They're
person in the
human.
universe. They're just a person who
Yeah.
struggled and tried hard to do their best and failed a lot and maybe did some good things. And so I feel like that kind of relationship between a child and a parent is one that brings out a lot of emotion for me.
Yeah,
And it's
definitely.
one that most people can relate to. But yeah, no, there are losses that happen, and moments, particularly, that really gets going in the second book of the trilogy. But
Mhm.
it's the third book that most people, I think, who've read the trilogy would say that's the one where they that hit them the hardest
Yeah.
emotionally, I would say, and then While Darkness Gathers too, I think, to a degree, because
Yeah.
whenever you're portraying found family
Yeah.
or sacrifice and friendship and all these things, our emotions get in there, and reunion and that kind
Right.
of thing, and just so yeah, it's really the endings where I feel like I
Yeah.
usually, my favorite books that make me get the most emotional, where the most tears come, is the
Yep.
ending, and I try to I aspired to do that in my books too. So the ending
Yeah.
of each book, but really the ending of the trilogy as a whole, and also the ending of While Darkness Gathers. So yeah. What
Yeah.
about you? What are your emotional that
Uh,
you can talk about in terms of books?
spoilers. Yeah. I think very similarly to you, parental relationships are a big one for me as a mother. And there's going to be some exploration of some experiences that I've had as a very young mother going forward into the series. I think also though I was, like I said before, I was homeschooled and I was an only child, and so
Oh, wow.
growing up, I had friends. I was involved in different activities, but it's a different kind of loneliness, I think, that you grow up with when you don't have siblings. And a lot of my friends were more long distance. So I saw that I talked on the phone or we saw each other like a few times a summer.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think for me specifically, found family is incredibly important because as I've grown older, I've kind of had the benefit of being an only child where I get to pick my non-biological siblings and kind of adopt people, whether they want to be adopted or not. um, but I mean, even within my book community here, I feel so very blessed to be able to have these great relationships from people that I can lean on and learn from and
Yep.
have these amazing deep conversations with, that we all are coming from a point of loving storytelling and specifically fantasy, which is such a
Mm.
beautiful gift to have that kind of community now. And I think I appreciate it maybe in a different way because I grew up without that kind of community as a kid. So yeah, for me, within the stories, those found families and motley crews are people coming from different backgrounds and being brought together into a found family is something that I often include in my books. Self-sacrifice is another really big theme for me. And the idea of some of the greatest exercises of honor in history, in ours or in a fantasy world, I think, is when someone lays down their life for somebody else or puts themselves in between danger and someone that they love, or even somebody that doesn't deserve it. You know, like there's a lot of different ways to look at that explore human courage and what that looks like in different ways. Loyalty is a big, I tend to be a loyal to a fault type of person. So there's a lot of that in some of my characters. And I try to explore both sides of that, like whatever character trait I'm infusing into these characters. I say, okay, what's the benefit of this? How does that make them stronger? And also, what are their weaknesses because of it? Because that, I think, gives you the kind of full, well-rounded look at each individual within the story. But yeah, those are kind of some of the big ones, I think. And there are definitely moments in the story where I have cried for sure.
Right. It's crazy. Yeah. Crying at your own while you're writing.
Yeah. We're such saps. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we all are longing to feel that sense of belonging. And the thing that I think epic fantasy does really well, when you have a group of, of misfits who come together and to work toward a common cause, it's something that really resonates with most of us, I think. Definitely.
Well, I think it's a very common experience for most people to feel like you don't belong either in a situation or in a place or whatever it might be. So I think that's, again, beauty of storytelling, right? Is that you have an opportunity for so many different people from so many different backgrounds and experiences to feel seen and to maybe learn something from a character that feels kind of like them, and might make them think about themselves in a different way or a better way, in the best scenario.
Beautifully said. Really.
Yeah. So what has kept you in the world for so long? What made you not get bored?
I think we talked about this a little in the beginning, but you and I are both people who are not capable probably of putting out a book every year. That's just, I can't do that. I'd love to be able to.
Same.
That would be awesome. But for me, this is not something I do. I'm not going to lie and say I don't want to make money from it, because I do, but that's not primary for me. I want to see how great of a story can I tell.
Right.
And my problem is letting go and saying, okay, I'm done. Go out in the world now.
Hands off.
That's been my problem, because I could tweak forever. I love editing. But I always want to see, can I make this better? Can I make this better? Can I make this better? And that's not how you make a living, by the way, as a writer. You can't spend 20 years writing your epic fantasy trilogy and expect to make a living from being a writer. Maybe I'll get faster, but I enjoy tweaking and trying to make this the greatest story I possibly can, and getting feedback from really great people like the agent I worked with or my developmental editor, AP Canavan. These are people with, professionals with a real good eye for story, and understanding what in a story connects with people, and hearing their feedback helped me to then go back to the story and make it even stronger, more relatable, for readers. And that's what I really want. I want to make a story that really does resonate with people. And I will play with words in a sentence forever. I love finding just the right cadence on a sentence by sentence level, even. Or this word, I don't like this quite as much as this word, which means almost the same thing, but for some
But it
reason,
sounds better.
this captures it better, or
Yep.
the sound's better in this sentence. I literally spend time doing that, and
Yeah.
enjoy it. That's the
Yeah.
problem, is that I actually enjoy it. So
That's horrible.
yeah.
How could you enjoy editing
But
your
it's
book?
because we enjoy the creative act so much,
Right.
and we find such fulfillment in it,
Right.
that I think we take our time to craft these stories. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how am I
Yeah.
speaking for you pretty well there too?
It's an art form, and I think no matter how fast you're writing a book, it's still an art form, and I think for us, we do, like you said, I really get kind of caught up in the details of how each individual character talks, and I don't want to just write dialogue. I want to write dialogue the way that character would think through this and how they would express it. And I'm one of those writers who I tried for years to let go and just draft and just put it all out there and then fix it later.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely rubbish at it. It's one of those things where if I'm writing a paragraph and I look at it and I'm like, no, that's not right, it will bother me incessantly until I fix it. And so that's one of the reasons why my drafting process takes a lot longer, because I'm doing essentially the equivalent of 3 or 4 edits while I'm writing the first draft.
I do that too.
I can't turn it off. It's like, nope, that's not right.
Actually, I've built it into my writing routine. So I will leave off writing one day, and the next day, first thing I do is I edit what I wrote the previous day, even though I'd already been editing the heck out of it. But I will spend time just to steep myself back into the world and the story. I'll spend time editing what I wrote the previous day. And only then will I go on in the story. And the next day, the same thing, So I don't even know how many times I've edited the books. It's just ridiculous. But,
I mean, it also, I know the very opening scene of the Bloodstones, I've had a lot of people tell me how much they love it. And I kind of laughed. Well, I'm glad, because that of all the whole book, that first scene,
worked on
I don't even know how many edit times it's been edited. So I'm glad it's good. It better be. So do you have a very consistent style that you've developed in terms of like, you write every day, do you have like goals?
I have, I try not to be too hard on myself, because I have a full-time job.
Right.
I have a family. I have a YouTube channel thing I'm doing, and it is, it's part of the deal. If you want to write books that people will actually hear about and read, you have to spend a certain amount of time marketing, and that's actually more time than you spend writing.
100%.
So, and on and on and on. So I try not to be too hard on myself, in terms of, wow, I'm not writing as much as I want, It's always the case.
Always.
But I primarily over the years have been much more productive, obviously in the summers when I'm not teaching, and in the winter I have a winter break too. So those are my real, those are the times when I can get the most work done.
Right.
And sometimes at the beginning of a semester, I can still keep going for a few weeks, but then when the papers start coming in and everything, it's like, nope, I have to pay attention to my students and
compartmentalize.
Yep. Yeah. So usually I have to stop, and then when the next break comes, rev up the old engine again and get going.
Try to get back on the bike and remember, oh yeah, can I still do this?
Yeah. But my style has stayed pretty consistent. I developed it over many years as a medievalist and as a fan of some older fantasy, like Tolkien and Le Guin, and those were models for me. But I also realized that I needed to write in a way that's accessible for modern fantasy readers.
Right.
So a lot of people will bounce off of Tolkien just because they don't like the more descriptive storytelling style, and B, the prose feels weird to them because they're not used to these archaic constructions and words and so on and so forth. Right. So I just find a balance. A writer who I think does really well with that actually is George R.R. Martin. I think he does a really good job of writing very accessible stories, but he still is very skilled at using older words and giving the sense that this is not our world, right?
Yeah.
For me, I don't want to read a supposed like fantasy that's set in a world that's supposed to not be our world. It's supposed to be an older feeling world.
Same.
But if the characters are talking like they're from New Jersey,
yep.
Sorry, but you're going to boot me right out of that, you know? So, but there's a balance somewhere, because if you overdo that, then it's going to sound wooden. It's going to be hard for your reader to really get into that.
Yeah.
So finding that balance was something that I had to work hard on, because my inclination is to go archaic, right? But I don't think anybody who reads the books would say, "Oh, that's inaccessible or difficult."
No.
But that's something I had to consciously kind of produce.
Well, and I'm sure when you've been steeped in that kind of writing in an occupation for so long, it's hard to kind of disengage yourself from that style. I mean, having read Way of Adan, I definitely like that I can see the influence of, you know, Tolkien and a lot of those more classic authors. But yeah, like you said, it's a very approachable, readable style. So I think you struck a really good balance with it. So
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, same. I'm the same way. I definitely get pulled out of a story very quickly if a character starts to sound like they're 21st century. Like it's like nope, that's
unless it's an urban fantasy or it's supposed to be more modern, then great, you know, then that's not a problem. But for a world that's supposed to be kind of medieval feeling, you know, and when somebody says, "Hey, what's up?" you know, and
Sup,
dude? No.
Nope. Yeah, I try not to be super nitpicky with that, but that is also something that drives me a little bonkers. So I definitely feel you on that.
Yeah.
So kind of one of my wrap-up questions for you is, in the future, how expansive would you like to see your world become? Do you see it expanding into other medium? Do you have a whole bunch of stories kind of in the works that are going to keep going with this world?
Yeah. Oh, what a lovely question. So first, in terms of other mediums, I have actually commissioned a fellow booktuber named Nikhil Koparkar and to write a song, which is
cool.
It's actually on my channel. It's like the homepage.
That's right. Yeah, I saw something pop up about that.
Yeah. So Nikhil composed this piece, which is, he did it after reading the trilogy. So he was familiar with the world. And I worked with him initially to say, I want it to feel like this, or here's some examples of where we could go. And then he pieced it all together. By the way, he's composed music for Wheel of Time and other TV shows and movies. He's a very accomplished composer. But he has a booktube channel called Shelf Esteem as well.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful human being. So I worked with him. I also said to him, I want you to make the cello central to it, because my older daughter plays the cello. And she plays for the piece. She was recorded in the music recording studio at my college. And that was incorporated into the rest of the piece, which I'm really happy with. So yeah, I love the intersections between music and fantasy and storytelling. So I wanted to have an Adan trilogy theme song, and I have one. Yeah,
that's so cool.
So yeah, that was a really neat experience, and I made a video with it featuring the art from the special edition by The Broken Binding. So when you click on that video and you hear, it's 3.5 minutes long. You hear the music, you'll see art from the special edition in the video. But in terms of I love that world that I spent time creating. I want to stay there for quite a long time. And so now that I've written the trilogy and the very short sequel, I have a couple plans. I'm actually working. My current project is a prequel.
Okay,
which is probably what I should have done in the first place, but not the story that I had in my head. So it didn't happen, but now it is a story in my head. And so I'm working on a prequel that takes place 60 years before the Adan trilogy. Yep. And then when I'm done with that, I think I want to go back to the future, because While Darkness Gathers is kind of a bridge between what I conceive of as the original Adan trilogy and then where I'm going in that world with the characters that I introduced in While Darkness Gathers, which is 16 years after the trilogy. So I introduced some characters there who are going to feature in future books,
Okay.
probably longer ones, and I want to spend time with them as I develop the world a little bit more. It's going to change. The world is going to change, and
Yeah.
characters, and probably me along with them. So
Yeah.
How about you? What are your plans for the Legends of Bruhai?
Well, there's going to be the 3 books in the trilogy, and one for sure, potentially 2 novellas that kind of slot in between the novels, that just kind of add a little bit of depth to what the reader already knows. I'm a big believer in the fact that novellas should supplement, not replace. So what I'm hoping is that through these novellas, the people who want a deeper understanding of certain character motives, or to see scenes that are just kind of referred to in the first book, are going to get that.
Yeah.
And then there will be a bridge novella that actually goes after the trilogy, that goes back in time several thousand years.
Oh, wow.
And explains what happened to the magic and why it is the way it is in the Legends trilogy. And then from there, I'm going to jump ahead about half a generation after Legends of the Bruhai to the series that I started back in college. So that one eventually.
So do you have a kind of complete manuscript for that sequel, which was the original story, or are you going to go back and really revise, or
I am to some degree. I do have a full manuscript for the first book, which I will probably rewrite, first of all, because I was so right off of reading Malazan that I was the influence was very heavy at that point. And I was still developing my own voice within epic fantasy at that point. So I think going back now with much more confidence in my own voice and not having as much influence kind of hovering over it. And also in writing Legends, it has changed the trajectory of the story to some degree in that second series, and deepened it. And there's some character crossovers between the 2 of them that I didn't even know had been set up subconsciously way back in college. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the same character. And that works perfectly.
Oh, cool.
Which is very exciting. So there will be characters that, the readers know already, but they're half a generation older, and the world conflict is getting a little bit more unstable. And so that whole set is kind of the plan currently. And after that, I have no idea.
That'll keep you busy for a while.
It'll keep me busy for a while. Like you, I have, YouTube is definitely a part-time job at this point. And I homeschool. I have 3 kids, and
that's a full-time job there.
It's a full-time job. So, I try to give myself a lot of grace too, for the same reason. I'm like, we're doing the best we can. I'm still making progress, and I'm very grateful to all of the readers who have really settled in and supported and encouraged my process. And they're just very patiently waiting. So,
but you put out other books too, I have to point out, right? Like you have your fantasy Western.
I do. Yeah. That was last year's. That was kind of a reset because, and I'm sure you've had some moments like this too, where you've been in this world for so long.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a little bit of a creative jostle or reset. And Cold Silver was definitely that for me last year, because I was really burned out. There'd been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in my personal life, and I didn't have the right brain space to really commit to Bruhai at that point.
Yeah.
And Cold Silver was a completely different, it was a challenge. It was my first person novel. So going from third person past to first person present was a big challenge. But it was really fun, and it kept that creativity alive last year. Good. And now I'm full on back into Bruhai and just absolutely loving it. And I've missed my characters so much. So yeah, it's been good. It's been really good.
Then it did the trick. Good.
It did. Yeah. So my last question, I want to remind everybody quick before I ask it. In the description box are going to be links to Dr. Chase's books. You can go check those out, and also check out his channel for more information and updates on the series. And the last question that I had, and you kind of answered this a little bit, but for those of the people that are reading your series and really falling in love with it and coming into this world that you've been building for 20 plus years now, what do you hope at the end of the day that they find or take away from the world that you've built?
Yeah, that's a nice question. Yeah. I would say what I would hope the most for a reader emerging from the Adan trilogy is that they feel a greater sense of connection with other people,
Yeah.
that they feel not just that it exists, but that it is such a beautiful part of life, that it makes life meaningful, that their lives can be meaningful through connection with other people. And sometimes even people that we think are really different from ourselves. But that is something that I would love for people to emerge from that reading experience. And also just a sense of catharsis.
Yeah.
A healthy emotional release that may be a mixture of sorrow and happiness, a mixture of a sense of loss, but also a sense of life and meaning, and a greater sense of expansion of self. A sense of transcendence, perhaps even a touch of sublimity if it goes really, really well. So, yeah, I guess that's probably enough.
I think that's a good start.
That's not ambitious at all. Yeah.
No, I think every storyteller wants that, though. We put so much of ourselves in what we write that we hope that our readers are willing to engage with as much of themselves when they come into the story, and that they're able to find something that's meaningful to them, something that resonates with the experiences that they've had, and hopefully encourages them to a greater sense of empathy or awareness of the world around them, and to be able to relate aspects of the story to their own life, whether it's in modern 21st century America or anywhere else in the world, to this ancient world, and realizing those things and those connections that make us all human, and what makes life worth living and meaningful. Yeah, I mean, again, tall order. But overall, too, I think at the end of the day, I hope my favorite stories I feel myself in. And I hope for all of my readers that they are able to find a home in the stories that I write in some way, whatever that looks like for them.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
That your readers find a home in your stories.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
What a great way to end it. Yeah. As readers, that's what we want too, right? Like, I love that feeling when I'm like, I can't wait to go back to this other person's world, because it feels like a home and it feels familiar.
Yeah. What a lovely thought.
Yeah. Well, Philip, I want to say a huge thank you for your time today, and for jumping on with me to just kind of have a chat about our books and why we love writing them.
The pleasure has been mine, and the honor. And again, thank you, Tori, for being so gracious to ask me to chat with you. I really had a great time.
Good. Awesome. Well, I wish you all the best with the Adan trilogy and all of your future pursuits. And I'm going to tell everybody again, go check out the links in the description box to make sure that you are checking out Dr. Chase's work. If you haven't already, there are some beautiful editions of The Way of Adan, and, a full finished trilogy. So for those of you in the audience who are looking for a finished trilogy, mine's not done yet. So please go read Dr. Chase's.
No, read Tori's anyway. Read it. We need support along the way.
It's true. That is something that I have actually responded to a couple of comments in my on my channel the last couple of months, with people that won't read things before they're finished. And I always encourage, like, well, the author needs to know that somebody cares if they finish the series. Yeah. So support authors at whatever point in the process they're at, and hopefully you find new favorites, whatever you're reading. But yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Chase. And thank you so much to everyone who is watching. I hope you guys are having a great week. I hope that you are all reading some 5-star reads, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.